Good evening. Welcome to Exit Theater Presents. My name is Christina Augello, and tonight our live streaming series, Exit Theater Presents, is very excited to bring you the fourth installment of Stuart Eugene Bousel's The Anarchy Quartet, all of them directed by Nick Trengove, and tonight featuring Kyle McReddie in the death and life of William born Adelin. Because our story takes place a long time ago, I'm going to read you a little bit of history. William Atheling, 1103 to 1120, who went by the affectionate title of Adelin, was a son of Henry I of England and Matilda of Scotland, the grandson of William the Conqueror and brother to the Empress Matilda. The Crown Prince of England, he was married to Matilda of Anjou in 1119 at the age of 16, and on track to inherit a kingdom on both sides of the English Channel, when in the autumn of 1120, he died in a shipwreck while crossing from Normandy to England. Popular history maintains that Adelin had actually made it to a lifeboat and would have survived the tragedy if he hadn't gone back to rescue his half-sister Matilda, who he heard calling for help. The boat was swarming with panicky passengers and capsized, taking Adelin and everyone else down with him. Adelin's death left a hole in the line of succession, and the empty throne would be fought over by the Empress Matilda and his cousin Stephen of Blois for almost 2 decades. This the anarchy in England would finally be resolved by the ascension to the throne of Matilda's son, Henry Plantagenet, and his wife, Eleanor of Aquitaine, founders of the dynasty that would carry England into the modern world. The last chapter of the Anarchy Quartet imagines Adelin in contemporary times, or is it the future? Observing the world from his perch on the rock that caused the shipwreck. Caught between life and death for over 900 years, he shares his thoughts and theories around the true nature of mortality, imparts the tiny piece of the divine plan that he believes he's been a part of before allowing himself to fade into the end. Or is it the beginning? Please enjoy the show.
Bottom out of the bore us all in 7 and the prince with a position French just all were for themselves. His soul seeking to breathe, wishing they learned how to swim. Without, like all the rest, fools. But it's because I went back for her. It's because his. Crossed and conquered. Now we're all living up to that bar. Blessing success. My father, late King Henry, first of his name, by the by. I was the brother to the Empress Matilda. Both of us children to a Matilda. At 16, I became married to yet another Matilda. We never had children, so I myself am father to nobody, except the era in which confusion, loss, and discovery burst from my death, the way Pegasus is said to have been born from the severed neck of Medusa. An interesting birth, to be sure. To be born a myth, to be born like a great triumph against oblivion. Sadly, the most important thing about me is that I died. My Pegasus envy runs. But then again, what makes most things interesting is that they die, or become a constellation. See Pegasus for an illustration? Here, we shall do so together. Then again, stars also die. By the time I died, a good number of them were already on their last legs. By the time I find myself speaking to you now, only a handful have joined them. One or two have gone out altogether. Well, not entirely. If you look where they were, you can see that space is somehow darker than the rest. The thing is, we see the light of a dead star long making a bid for the future, drowning one, making one last grasp, or two, why not, for a bit of driftwood, even when it's obvious that wood won't be drifting. Nothing likes to think of its. Why should the stars be any different? Coming today, we must handhold at the top of the pit. Looking at that, it seems the same. That's why we name them. Put arms on Perseus, Cassiopeia, Andromeda, Pegasus. All so that we can feel like there's something out there that's both noble and permanent. And yet it's the ones that fall that we wish upon. Of course, those aren't actually stars. It's nice to think that they were, isn't it? To wish upon those that fall so that we may yet somehow rise up and fly away. I know what you're thinking. He knows an awful lot about astronomy for someone who died in the 12th century. Early 12th century, might I add. Well, we who came before you, generally speaking, were far more aware of how the universe worked than you tend to imagine us. And we who can't seem to pass on to eternity just yet have the added benefit of knowing a thing or two beyond our mortal time. It's the one consolation we get for not dying completely when everything else dies entirely. Which it does. Eventually. I hope. Oh, do not be sad about that. It's a good thing, really. A blessing. Death lends meaning. It is the finiteness of things that endows them with gravitas and causes us to reflect. So without death, there'd be no weight to anything. Without any weight, there'd be no need to reflect. And reflection is important. Reflection is the reason we rest on our journey. Our journey, which, like everything else, is doomed to end, but then start again. Though perhaps not with us at the center of it, or looking like we do, or like we did. Say perhaps we were once a shining star, and now we're a bit of darkness, just a little darker than the rest. Is one more handsome than the other? Well, certainly, but that's not the point. The point is the individual thing, be it Prince or half-sister, flying horse or star is not eternal. The cycle of creation and negation and creation is the only thing that is eternal, the only thing that doesn't die. But if there aren't pauses in that cycle, if there aren't moments when, perched over temporary calm seas, we aren't met with our image and asked to hold its gaze, then individual cycles have no significance. They are just wheels turning upon wheels, the gears of some clock made for beings untroubled by the limits of existence because they're unaware of them, and thus can't be bothered to think much beyond themselves, let alone beyond everything. But it is in the pause of those wheels that each of us makes a cog of, that God makes themselves known to us, and we make ourselves known to God. Death is God's finger holding the minute hand of time. So is birth. And on nights like these, when the channel grows calm, even though we're sitting on the cusp of winter, I rise from the deep and sit on this rock and listen to the boat, towboat, or aircraft carrier. You may see me. You also may not, but you will feel me. You will stop for a moment and think, what does it all mean? And that is the divine saying, hello. Or just me. But then again, I see you, regardless if you see me. I see all of you. And I hear you too, even if you don't hear me. The view from this rock is exceptional. But then again, it better be. I died on it. And I was a prince, you know. Adelin, Adelin, upon the sea, wish upon a star. Adelin, Adelin, first so near, then so far. They called me Adelin because, at the time, there were so many Williams running around, they almost outnumbered the Matildas. And there were so many Matildas. As I said, my grandfather was the first William, my uncle the second. Both heads crowned, though the first because he took it off someone named Harold during a time of far too many Harolds. And the other because he had it dropped on his head when the conqueror finally laid down his arms and went to God. Welcome, no doubt. The one thing we can all agree about my grandfather, that he made his... Please note the way I said that. Bringing with him the language to mix with the Anglo-Saxon over 500 years, that we have the modern English language. Because of William the Conqueror, that we have William Shakespeare, William Wordsworth, William Williams. So believe you me, God threw open the gates to heaven when he died, laid out the good china. Sadly, my uncle didn't live for much too long after his father, which is how my father, his brother, became king. And he still called me, much like my mother did. And my sister named Matilda. And my half-sister named... My wife, named Matilda by called me Billy. I like Adelin. It sounds like a flower, doesn't it? Like a flower that blooms in early spring, watered by the fresh snow, as white as bone, or the caps of waves. An opening to reveal inside a blue so pure could only be matched by the midday sky. And then, just a moment later, the flower's gone, wilted. Just a pause and nothing more. A brief sense when Adelin had been, and you can't remember where exactly, so you feel it was something else. Something sturdier. Or prolific. Perennial. It's a good name for a boy, isn't it? Or girl, or any child really, but it's hard to imagine for a man or a woman. It sounds affectionate, yeah? And thus something you outgrow. It was always meant as a temporary name for me, always. It was my familiar address, as they would say. The one I would have given up when I became king. The one only to be known by a dwindling cabinet of close companions. My mother, my sister, my half-sister, my wife. Until one day I too died, and it would be buried forever. Gone. Buried as it would be under the sobriquet I inherited from my grandfather, who, as a conqueror, hoped for at least a few more Williams to reap the rewards he'd sown. But alas, I was a spring flower. And though there are spring flowers that bloom short and perfect again and again, I was of the variety that doesn't return. I only made it to the beginning once, which is what makes my story a sad one, but also one that's remembered, or at least has impact. I mean, so many things wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have died. If I hadn't have gone under the same waves my grandfather sailed across unhindered. And the story of how one boy's death plunged a whole kingdom into disarray is quite a good story, isn't it? Or that and the part why I went back for her. My half-sister, the other Matilda, when she was drowning right before I was. People love that part. They love the part where I went back for her, and they love the part where we both died. Honestly, it's true. If I'd have successfully rescued her, I doubt it would have turned into much of a legend, because I no doubt wouldn't have turned into much of a king. Just one more William trying to equal the first. But it's because we died, the other Matilda and I, that it seems heavy with meaning. Don't you see? My story, think of it like this. Everyone loves the story of Orpheus, yes? Well, everyone with a soul. We all love the idea of somebody risking everything to find us, no matter how lost we become. And just as Orpheus lost his Eurydice, so too did I lose my half-sister Matilda. And just as Orpheus eventually too lost himself, so too did I lose myself. And the sadness of that is something we can all relate to, isn't it? Boy does something for love, doesn't work out. Sounds like somebody you know, doesn't it? Maybe someone you are. Boy does something for love, works out, becomes king, lives and dies after a lifetime of petty evils and small triumphs. Also might sound like someone you know or are, but the musical adaptation isn't going to make much of a slam dunk at the Tony Awards now, is it? Still, there's danger in loving a story we always hope will turn out differently, even though we know it won't and secretly wish it wouldn't. Loving such a story may lead us to make decisions from which there's no return. It may lead us to think, well, if nothing else, at least they'll put me amongst the stars. But so what? Those die too. And even though we see their light long after they're gone, they will eventually wink out to something. Probably God, but it's good to caveat to something. Everything is as brief as an Adelin in the frost. So what's the point? What's the point in trying, Orpheus? Unfortunately, we can't ask him, but I suppose we could ask his friends. But no one seems to remember their names. Strangest thing is that I died surrounded by others. I died in the arms of someone I loved. And yet I'm the only ghost here. I'm the only one. Well, I do suppose there is only room for one. It's not a very large rock. Well, it's something rather formidable about 6 feet down. Oh, you've all seen Titanic. There was one person who survived the whole thing. He made it out to this very spot and clung to it until rescue arrived. They say there was another, the captain of the white ship, no less. Apparently, when he learned that I had been lost, he was so afraid of my father's wrath, he went ahead and rolled right back into the sea. I suppose that's why I have no company. Not even Matilda. Not even one of the Matildas. Who knew to think how plentiful they were, that heaven couldn't spare just one? Though, it's unlikely they all went to heaven. My mother, for sure, and my wife, who became a nun. My half-sister, if my prayers mean anything. But the main Matilda? Well, she wasn't a terrible person. She was a rather good little girl. But you don't get to be called queen, let alone empress, by staying a good little girl. Then again, it's hard to say for certain. It all happened quite some time ago, and timelines aren't something I can manage well anymore, or can't when one only exists in the pause. But still, I imagine she got a way to remember her name over all the rest, knowing her. And it couldn't have come cheap. Mine cost me my life. Hers must have cost her her soul. Or at the very least, her peace. Adelin, Adelin, sing to the waves as you sit upon the sea. Adelin, Adelin, won't you come to me? Ah! Well, 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 aren't you a brave little thing? Lucky for you, I'm not starving and never will be again. They're between us and the barnacles. I do love a good bisque. Wouldn't that be a terrible way to end? Bested and basted. I'm sure you don't deserve it. But then again, whoever does. Not really the way the world works, is it? Not that the world is a terrible place, but that life, rather, is. Don't you think? Well, maybe not for a crab, but for a human, by the by. It's such terrible pain. And I knew that, even in my little time. And I knew that, even as a prince. I knew that happiness was just moments, really, fleeting. In between sorrows, defeats, between the earth burning and the sea drying up and the sky falling. Joy is even rarer. The moments before the sinking of a ship, the last breaths before dying. And nothing matters. Well, no, not true. Everything matters, but it's all sort of equitably important and so not terribly significant. But there are some things, namely, that which we can do for each other, and we still have it in us to do them, whether it be to our position, our power, or proximity. When the hand reaches out for aid, it is the reaching back that resonates for the ages. And so Orpheus reaches for Eurydice. It is the reaching back, or the failure to do so, that's what matters. So of course I went back. In a world of darkness, given a chance to be the light, wouldn't you have done the same? I like believing that of you. Even now, waving your little claw at me, you're not trying to ward me off, you're trying to salute. You probably think I need help. Or a friend. Both are true. But maybe you're also asking me to put you down. And that's the problem with reaching out, isn't it? So much room for miscommunication. But then again, claws reaching out to each other for good or ill is all we really ever have, is it? And so Eurydice reaches back for Orpheus. All right, I'll put you down. If you see her, tell her I don't regret anything, and that I'm lonely, and that I hope she's well. We know there is something, but we don't know what it is. Something that was here and now is gone, and for most of the world it never was. But like everything that ever was, it's left its place in the darkness, and we are still trying to do our part to fill it. I'm using we here, the royal we here, to include all of us, but also because, as I said, I am royalty. And we are attempting to do our part to fill the hole at the center of the universe. But it's so much bigger than us. Like a crown too big for our head, or an ocean too deep for our feet to reach the bottom, and so we become tangled, and so we drown. But when I was drowning, I wasn't thinking, oh, well, this will probably start a war. I was thinking, I found her. I found her, and her arms are so warm in this cold, cold sea. Everything dies. Matilda died, my half-sister and full sister too, eventually. Our mother, our father, my wife, cousin Stephen and young Eustace. All of the Eleanors and Henrys, and all the Eleanors and Henrys, and the Matildas and Johns and Joans, they all left behind them. All the Williams, all the Londoners in their terrible hats, even the Pope, even me, even you, even David. Yes, King David of Scotland. Though we did certainly live for quite a long time. There's always one. But eventually, everyone who survived me is ashes now. It's informative and comforting. May I too arrive one day. But for now, I sit on the rock that tore the bottom out of the boat whose shipwreck was my assassination by God. And you may have noticed that I do not, contrary to popular belief about the undead, glow with an unearthly pallor. I am instead a darker part of the darkness, shadow of the night, a void not only empty of stars, but the possibility of them ever being or having ever been. But if you look closely, if you peer and peer and peer, you can see something at the center of where my heart once was. Something bright and perfect and eternal, that though it is folded in on itself, continues to shimmer within, like a dormant seed waiting for the spring, knowing it will come again, not with certainty, but hope. Hope that can only exist in the young. And when you die young is the only thing you leave the world with, and leave with the world. I died so young. I was so hopeful. It was so sad, but please do not be. You and I are both stars. Even dead, our light has thousands of years left to burn. And even just a part of darkness, a bit of darker than the rest, that will just be the beginning. Because something will come. Something will come and fill the hole we leave behind. Look up. See Pegasus bursting forth from the neck of Medusa. Adelin, Adelin, flower of the sea, crowned like a star. Adelin, Adelin, now so near, still so so far.
Thank you, everyone, for coming and joining us for the Anarchy Quartet. For all four of them, they were stellar pieces of work, which we're hoping to bring back in person at the Exit in the spring. Nick and Stuart are working on blending the stories together, so we'll have a wonderful piece of work coming up. And I'm happy to announce that I do believe the Exit will reopen to the public in the middle of February. That's our plan, so nobody mess with it. Also, if you'd like to help us reopen, your donations would be gratefully accepted. On our website, you can find out more information, www.theexit.org. We are going to do our Fringe Festival in September of 2022. Applications will be available in December. And there's probably lots of other things, but in the word of my dear friend, Diane DePrima, the only war is the war against imaginations. So please let your imagination soar and support the arts continually. And thank you so much, and good night.